Today it's the much anticipated and feared stainless trim dent removal repair video. Here we have this piece of trim here that has suffered some sort of catastrophic event. See, we've got a big dent right here. And this is from the hood flying open on the highway. And this end here is a little mangled and disfigured. Seems easy enough. Problem is, we have an inner structure in the way, but all hope is not lost because this is going on a truck that already has a chopped roof. So we can actually cut off a lot of this nastiness here, which will save a little bit of time, I hope. Also, General Motors built like a couple million of these things. So if we screw this one up, we can always find another. And if we can't find another, these are reproduced. So we got lots of options, but I think we'll give it a go. Can't possibly make it any worse. Now what you want to do is you want to take this piece that you cut off the end here, and you want to set that aside somewhere where you won't be able to find it later. So to kind of peel this away from the inner, I have these custom made door skin pliers, and I used a flat bladed screwdriver, and I used these channel locks, just whatever I had, and I only peeled it away enough where I could get it so I could slide it out. Obviously, we have the luxury of chopping this, so we were able to slide it out the end. If I wasn't chopping this, then we'd have to be a little more careful, and if I was doing that, I would only peel this edge back as far as it had to actually release that inner piece. I don't want to go the full 180 degrees open because at that point, it would be basically very difficult to actually refold that edge without destroying this outer section, and we don't want to put more damage into it, obviously. So hopefully I can still hammer it back the way that it is now. If not, we'll just use some panel adhesive or JB Weld to glue this piece back in, and that should be okay. It's really tempting to just take a hammer and just start pounding away on it, but I find actually that just makes more work for us later on. Gets the initial dent out fast, but then we have a lot of finishing work. So a lot of times, depending on how thick the stainless is, we can actually get the damage out just by kind of pushing on it, or using a hammer and a chisel to accurately pinpoint that damage and push it out. It's really hard to accurately hammer it out because you're just kind of going all over the place. Whereas if you use a chisel and a hammer, then you have a direct point which you're hammering out, and that just makes for less work later on. Now at the base of this here, you can see that this is kind of flattened out here a little bit. If the camera would ever focus. Nope, not today. So it's kind of flattened here. Something has happened to it. You can see it's flattened out. It's not looking quite right on this side here. So I'm just going to take a socket and try to roll that out a little bit. Yeah, that's looking a little more rounded and proper. It's not all flattened out on the end now. Okay, so I've just been using some 80 grit on a block and just kind of pushing up the damage, and it's not quite there yet. I think we're gonna have to use the file on this. But the one thing with this old stuff is there's usually not just one dent. If we go through here, you can see there's a lot of little things like this just from gravel coming up and hitting it over the years. I think there's one right here as well. It's actually easier to see on the inside usually. There you go. You can see that's this little guy right here. So that's got to get taken out because that's going to look like garbage. There's no point in fixing just one dent. Got to get them all out, I guess. You can see where we've just been tapping away at it and pushing on it out. So for these little guys, like this one here, I actually have just used these punches. Work awesome for that. I got a few different styles with kind of a sharper tip. And there's no need to even hammer it or anything. I'll just show you. We'll just push these right out. Line it up with a low spot. I usually just run some steel wool or some light sandpaper on the inside, and it kind of reveals all these highs and lows for us so we know what we're working with. Yeah, there's no need to hammer it. Less is more when it comes to stainless, I find. Try not to slip and slash your finger open on this sharp edge here. Pro tip. And then we can just sand over with our 80 grit. So you can see we found another little ding right here. You know, this is what happens with this stainless, is it's just a slippery slope. You go to fix one dent and you end up finding all these other little ones, and you know, if you only fix the one dent, then suddenly these stand out really obnoxiously. So it's just never ends. Again, we're just going to use the same technique here. Just take our little punch doodad here, put it on the inside, put it up against this flat dolly here, try to find the high point from the inside here. It's like about there, and we'll just push down on it, and we just take our sandpaper on a sanding block. This is 80 grit. And there you go. Get rid of the dent there. All we did was just pushed up with that punch on the inside. You can see where we marked it with a punch. It just pushes it up. Didn't have to hammer it or anything like that, and just used 80 grit to take it down. And that's that. So a lot of the times with this, you can actually get really decent results just doing what I showed you there, pushing the dents out and then sanding it with the 80 grit on a hard block. And you get pretty satisfactory results, especially with like little dings and dents like hail dents or door dings or whatever. This was a pretty harsh dent. So what we're going to do is kind of go backwards here. I think it would probably turn out okay if we just left it, but there is some whoop-de-doos in it just because of how damaged it was. So I'm going to use a metal file on this and just kind of get it that last little bit, just kind of mark it up and kind of get it blocked out a little bit smoother. I mean, we have to file it anyways because we're going to be welding this end. So if you don't have to file it, or you can avoid it in any way, don't bother with this because we're going to add a whole bunch of work by filing this, because as soon as we put file marks in it, that's just another layer of scratches we have to remove before the polishing process. You know, I'll be sanding this all up through finer grits from 80 all the way up to, I don't know, 1,000 or so before we start polishing it. So adding those file marks is just going to add that much more time. And again, you can get really, like, this would probably look okay if it was polished, but we're going to get fussy with it, and make more work for ourselves, because why not? We'll just lightly go over it. Obviously this is quite thin, so we got to be very careful, not trying to carve out a new shape on it or take off excess material. Just trying to kind of make sure we got all the highs and lows and whatever kind of all on a level plane here. Alright, well now that we made a whole pile of unnecessary work for ourselves, murdering this thing with the file, now we get to switch back over to the 80 grit on a block. Very important that you use a hard block. And now what we're going to do is just slowly start working our way up through the various grits. And we filed more or less in a straight line, so now we're going to sand kind of opposite that line. If we all sand all in one direction, then what will end up happening is you'll just end up masking all the scratches from the previous grit, and those will show up when you go to polish it, and you'll be very sad. Well, I won't make you watch me sand this, because there's a lot of sanding coming up. The dent removal was the easy part. The sanding part is what takes forever. Get this little guy kind of roughed out. Gather around, folks. This is the part where I completely biff this up. So what I done here is I got this little piece slid back inside here, the inner piece. And what I'm going to try to do now, without completely destroying this, is I'm going to try to hammer this edge back down. And I got the outside kind of taped up, but I'm really worried about, screwing it up quite terribly. So I don't think we're going to clamp it quite as tight as it originally was. I'll probably just go back eventually and just kind of glue in some panel bond or JB Weld or something in here to hold it a little better. But I mean, it's probably not going to go anywhere, but that's what we're doing right now. So let's try not to destroy this any worse than it already was. I think that went way better than we could have hoped for. It doesn't look like we put any waves that weren't already there. So that's good. That was the part I was kind of most nervous about, other than the welding part. I didn't quite crimp it as tight as it originally was, just to be on the safe side. But like, I can't move this at all. It's in there tight. And if you want to, we could probably even just put some butyl kind of around here just in case it wants to rattle eventually, but like there's no way that's going anywhere. Now let's screw it up by welding it. Alright, we're ready to really mess this thing up now. I think we're all prepped to get this cap welded on here. Full disclosure, I have not TIG welded stainless steel in over 3 years, and I wasn't very good at it back then. And would you believe that if you don't practice at something every day, you don't magically get better at it. So this is most likely going to be a disaster. Also, I've never actually used this welder for welding stainless steel before. I was using a different welder when I had a job, like a real job anyways. And so, yeah, I'm going to give this a try here, and we're going to try not to destroy all the hard work we've already put into this. So for filler rod, I'm actually just using little strips that I cut out of this piece that we removed for the chop. I just wanted to give a big shout out to Matt, who commented on the last video and suggested doing this. I was worried about having the weld ghost. Often, you know, if you add just regular filler rod or whatever, what'll end up happening a lot of times is the weld will ghost and you'll be able to see where it was joined. But if you use filler rod from, you know, the same grade as what you cut out, then that's not an issue. So again, a huge thank you there to Matt for suggesting this. What a great idea. You know, some of you are just way too smart. This isn't gonna go very well. So I got this end welded in. It's not perfect, but I think it'll do for the truck it's going on. And now what I'm doing is I'm just sanding this thing up through the various grits up until it's ready to be polished. So I won't make you watch me sand this thing over and over again 800 times. But I mean, I got no shame, but there's even limits to what I'll force you to sit through. So I'll just quietly sand this thing for the rest of my life. And when it's all sanded, we'll come back and then we'll get ready for final polish. Okay, well, here we are, just sanded up to rough 2000 grit. Some would argue that's probably a waste of time, and they would be correct. I just like to spend more time sanding than I do on the buffing wheel, because once you see my buffing wheel set up, you'll understand why, hopefully. Well, there you go. There's the final product. Not perfect as nothing ever is, but I think it's going to be, more than good enough for what is going on. Like, look at this. Look at the truck it's going on. You know, I'll probably give it a final polish when it's actually ready to be installed for the last time. But I mean, it's not going to get installed for a couple of years. So we'll have to find some safe place to put this where it's not going to get destroyed by welding sparks and dropped on the floor and stepped on and all that stuff. But down here, that's where the big dent was. We got that kind of worked out, half decent. Up at the top here, this is where I shortened it and welded it for the chop. And just big shout out to the fella in the comments in the last video who suggested using little strips cut out from the piece that we removed as filler rod. That really saved the day. I was worried about the weld kind of ghosting on us, but there doesn't appear to be any ghosting of the weld. So that worked out awesome. Again, thank you to whoever suggested that. Some of you are just way too smart, but it sure is helpful, when I'm struggling, which I often am. On this side, you can see there is two little pits in the weld. One right here, and then one right here. But I'm not going to get greedy and try to chase those out. You can't see them from back here, and I mean, when the hood's on, you're not going to be able to lean in too far, and actually, well, if you're leaning in too far, you're going to scratch the paint, and nobody should be looking at it that close. So I'm quite pleased and content with that. That could have gone really bad. Like I said, I think it's been 4 years since I did any stainless welding, and I've never been very good at it. So was able to stick it together, and I'm going to call that good enough. So this is something you can absolutely do yourself at home. You don't need any fancy tools. This is all we use, just random blunt objects. You probably don't even need any body hammers if you're really hard up, These are just used old hammers here. Just a regular old metal file. Yeah, this is just random blunt objects, couple of punches. If you're using chisels, just make sure that you grind should be fairly obvious, but you don't want a pointed chisel. You'll end up poking a hole, and you don't really want to do that. So yeah, and this is just like a chunk of round rod welded onto a piece of steel. So like that's literally all you need. Sanding block and some sandpaper. So this is a great way to make your project car look way better for cheap. It's nothing like having a nice paint job and the stainless looks like it went through a demolition derby still. You can stay moving forward on your project without spending a lot of money. Just peck away at this. You don't need any fancy equipment or anything. All you need is, some random blunt objects, some patience, and a positive attitude. And if that doesn't work, then get a bigger hammer, I guess. I actually also used to use or had some hardwood blocks of various shapes. That works really good. So the wood doesn't mark up the steel as bad as the metal does, but I couldn't find them, so I just used what I had laying around. There's also, if you're getting serious about it, some guys will make their own dies and use like a press to push out the damage. So that would all work really good, but for, me fixing one piece of stainless trim like every few years, it's not worth my time. It's faster just to hammer it out with the junk I got laying around. But if you're doing this on a regular basis or you had a lot of trim to do, it'd probably be worth it to be a little more organized and whatever. But I'm only ever going to repair one of these windshield things in my lifetime. So even if you have a popular car like a Camaro or a Mustang where you can buy all the stainless trim brand new, you can save a lot of money by doing this, using these techniques here to fix your original trim. And honestly, the aftermarket trim, it's usually paper thin, and if you're lucky, it'll arrive to you undamaged. But usually it ends up showing up dented or twisted or whatever. And if it's not dented and twisted, you'll surely dent and twist it putting it on because it's super thin compared to the original stainless. So, anywhere you can save a buck on your project is definitely a win in my book. And well, there's lots of cars out there where you can't buy the stainless and you don't really want to spend 30 years on eBay or whatever, or going to swap meets trying to find that one little piece of trim because it's got a bend in it. you know, you might as well try to fix it and not really anything to lose if it's already bent, right? I'm definitely not good at fixing stainless, and in fact, I actually hate fixing stainless. I think the last piece I fixed was like 3 years ago, and hopefully it'll be another 3 years before I have to fix anything else. Luckily, the vehicles I work on, they don't have any trim. This is the only trim on like the whole truck, so that'll hold us over for a while. But again, this is something that you can absolutely do at home. If you do want to see somebody who's actually like really good at this and see what's possible, I recommend checking out that Cold War Motors channel. Check out the 60 Fury that he restored. I think every piece of trim on that car was bent and twisted or damaged in some way, and he was able to restore all that trim. It's like unbelievable. So, you know, there's people out there that are really good at this, but I am not. So I hope that was kind of helpful. This is a good way to stay moving forward on your project. Even if you're low on funds, you can get out in the garage or even in the house. If your garage isn't heated during the winter, peck away on some stainless. All it costs you is time and a little bit of sandpaper, and it's got to get done anyway, so you might as well do it at some point. Better than when the car is almost finished and you're trying to rush through it. You know, even if you're only able to put in a half hour on your project every day, a half hour a day is better than not working it at all, because what happens if you don't work on it is suddenly one day off turns to a week off, turns to a year off, and it turns to 10 years off, and now you're like me and you got a whole pile of unfinished projects kicking around, collecting dust for years and years. So don't be like me. Get out there in the garage or whatever. Work on your project a little bit every day. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope some of you found that helpful. I've been promising a stainless trim repair video for like over 2 years now, basically since we started the channel. If anybody is interested in seeing how I do stainless repair, maybe I'll put together a video on that too. I don't know. Again, I'm surprised that there's, 500 over 500 people that actually want to watch this type of stuff. And I finally had some stainless trim that needed to be repaired. So number one rule for me, at least, is only do what you're going to be doing anyways. Don't go out of your way to make a video on something if it's not something you need. So we needed that stainless cut down. It's going to save us time later on. We'll be glad that we got it out of the way now. And yeah, I'll stop rambling.